What up, y'all? St. Pete. So before I get started, I just want to say this might be a little long, but I promise you that this is all meat and potatoes. This is straight spiritual cloth talk. This is so important for the times that we're in right now, for people looking for some spiritual guidance, some spiritual wisdom. I've read this chapter earlier today, and I was moved and compelled to share it with y'all. So, just wanted to say that before I get started, that it'll be worth your time if you're looking for spiritual guidance and wisdom. So, we're going to read a chapter out of Initiation. I read a different chapter, which was Sons of God, the first chapter that I read to everybody. This chapter is called The 12 Sets of Twin Characteristics. The next evening I found myself standing before Patap again. The time has come, says he, for you to study and practice the 12 sets of opposites as your next exercise. In your initiation, you will be examined concerning them. So listen carefully and make a point of remembering what I'm telling you now. Just as keeping silent and talking are the two complementary manifestations of the same force, in the same way, there are 12 sets of opposites which you must learn to control. From now on, you will spend only your mornings in the temple and go back to the palace. And you must seize every opportunity to be among people as much as possible, because it is far easier to master each of these sets of opposites when you are in the temple than it is in the palace. Here, you only meet people like yourself, neophytes, striving to attain divine unity, as well as priests and priestesses already living in divine unity. But in the everyday world, you are subject to all kinds of temptations. You meet people who are slaves of their bodies, and such people try to influence you too. The danger of falling is much greater. If you can master all the characteristics and properties applicable throughout the world, you will also be able to pass the initiation examinations. These 12 sets of opposite characteristics are keeping silent, talking, receptivity and resistance to influence, obeying and ruling, humility, self-confidence, lightning like speed, and circumspection, to accept everything, to be able to differentiate, ability to fight, peace, caution, courage, to possess nothing, to command everything, to have no ties, loyalty, contempt for death, regard for life, indifference, love. The earth is now going through a long period in which body-dominated and self-seeking people will gradually take over the ruling power. But you already know that wherever negative forces are manifest, positive forces must also be present, although in the unmanifested state. During this dark period of the earth, the sons of God who manifest the divine laws of selflessness will gradually abandon the earthly plane, withdrawing to the spiritual plane of the unmanifested. Nevertheless, they will continue to work in the human subconscious, as they actually will be the unconscious of humanity and will manifest themselves in the souls of maturing people as yearning for liberation and salvation. On earth, the megalomania of certain individuals, together with the growing dissatisfaction of the enslaved masses, will lead to bitter and even bitterer struggles throughout thousands of years. Many millennia of constant struggling and bickering and the supremacy of avarice, vanity, envy, vengefulness, hate, and other animal characteristics would eradicate from the face of the earth everything that is good and true and beautiful, were it not for the divine providence and a group of spiritually united people under the guidance of the sons of God working on a spiritual plane, who will save our secret knowledge from sliding into oblivion. The earth, like every other planet, is under the guidance of a high spiritual power, and this power manifests itself through the sons of God in a manner appropriate for the people concerned. It is manifested through a group of initiated people who through their development have become peers of the sons of God. They are all co-workers in the great divine plan of saving the earth from darkness, isolation, and the rule of material and diabolical forces. Every initiate takes part in this work, and as you are to be initiated, this means you too. In order to be a useful co-worker in this great plan, one must first master the whole scale of the sets of opposites, and you too, for your initiation, will have to pass an examination in them. Mastering these attributes means that you use them at the right time and in the right place. The same attribute that is divine at the right time and in the right place is satanically evil at the wrong time and in the wrong place. This is because God creates only what is good, beautiful, and true. There are no bad characteristics as such, and no bad forces, but only wrongly used characteristics and wrongly applied forces. This is the Hermetic principle of being able to be wrong and right at the same time in everything that you do. You've already found out what it means to speak or to keep silent at the right time and in the right place. To keep silent is perfectly divine and brings blessings on all concerned, if we do so where and when we should. But on the other hand, if we keep silent in a place or at a time when we should speak up, as for example, when we might save a person from a great danger, and just a word, we might save a person from a great danger with just a word, or keeping silence becomes satanic. And if we talk in the wrong place and at the wrong time, the divine gift of speech is turned into satanic chatter and gossip. In the next twin pair of opposites, receptively is divine. If we are receptive and open to everything that is high and beautiful, good and true, that is, if we are receptive to God's will and let Him work in us, on the other hand, the receptivity or impressionability is disaster if it becomes a spineless lack of character and capitulation to influence. Ability to resist influence means the ability to put an unflinching resistance to all low influences. But if we also put up resistance against higher forces, we immediately turn our divine attribute of resistance to influence into a satanic kind of self-isolation. It is the duty of every co-worker in the great divine plan to give absolute obedience to God's will. The latter can manifest itself directly through you or through other people. You can recognize God's will when you thoroughly examine everything that is asked of you to be sure that it's in agreement with your innermost conviction. God speaks to us through our innermost conviction, and we must give Him absolute obedience. On the contrary, to obey someone against our own conviction purely for reasons of cowardice, fear, material advantage, or merely wanting to be good, that is for low personal reasons. This is servility and is satanical. And that's, like I said too, the idea of Satan is the internal adversary. Shaitan was the internal adversary, When your thinking, your emotions, and your actions are not in line with each other, that is satanic. That's what we're referring to when we say it's satanic, the devil in us that we all must conquer. Ruling means giving ignorant and weak people some of the ruler's own willpower. Universal love, uniting all the forces active within the people, should lead the people towards a general well-being without infringing on their right of self-determination. Any ruler who, without love and for selfish motives, imposes his will on others and violates their right of self-determination makes the divine activity of ruling into satanical tyranny. And that's where natural law comes in. Natural law, internal monarchy, external anarchy, ruling ourselves to be for anarchy and for monarchy at the same time. Internal monarchy, we are ruling ourselves. Therefore, we don't need exterior rulers. This is natural law. Humility is what we must feel towards the divine, towards the higher self which animates us. You must realize that all the good, beautiful, and true attributes belong to Him, that your person is an instrument for manifesting divinity, but by itself and without divinity, it represents merely an empty husk. You should recognize within yourself the same divinity, the same eternal being which manifests itself throughout the universe. And you must subject yourself humbly to this divinity. But you must never subordinate yourself to earthly or sub-earthly powers or bow before earthly forms, for this would mean turning divine humility into weak, cowardly, satanic self-humiliation, and by doing this, you would violate the divinity which animates you with its own eternal being. That's why I say that the most dangerous religion is atheism. Because if you don't believe in God, you create a power vacuum that allows man to be the arbiter of law. There is only one law. That's God's law. That's natural law. You don't have the right to infringe upon other people's self-determination. As long as you are not causing harm to another person, another sentient being, if you are not causing harm, you are in your right. Right is simply not causing harm. If you're not causing harm, it is a right to self-determination. If you want to be a good servant within the divine plan for salvation of the world, you must never forget that you do not live and work on your own strength. All power comes from God, and all powers you manifest come to you from your higher self, from God. Constantly remember that your person as such is an imaginary being. Your true being, the only eternal reality within you, is God. That's why self-confidence means having confidence in the God dwelling within your heart, but not in the phantom being of your person as such. Divine self-confidence is indispensable for every creative activity and represents an inner union with God. But when a person imagines his qualities and powers are his own and not God's, he turns divine self-confidence into satanic false pride and presumption. To be a co-worker within the great divine plan, you must also be able to make decisions with lightning-like speed. You must learn instantaneously, without hesitation, to choose the best of a number of different possibilities. Situations can arise in which only a moment's delay can mean missing the unique, never recurring opportunity. When you act in a moment with complete concentration and with a presence of mind that stands above and beyond all concept of time. Your power to decide instantly is divine, but acting quick as a flash without concentration and presence of mind turns divine lightning-like speed into satanic haste. And that's why you must also learn divine circumspection. Before acting, you must control your temper and with lots of patience allow the decision to ripen within you. In order to recognize the will of God, you must often allow yourself time to reach the right decision. That's what it means to act with prudence. But if you carry prudence and circumspection to the point of never reaching any decision at all, you're turning divine circumspection into satanic doubting indecision. Controlling your temper. That's something that I have to work on as well. This really spoke to me. So that's why I'm sharing with you, because I learned so much from just reading this. As a useful co-worker in the divine plan, you must learn to accept everything that fate brings you. Your worth is not determined by external circumstances, but by the degree in which you manifest God. Worldly degradations or humiliation cannot destroy or even reduce your inner values. By the same token, praise or glorification cannot make them greater either. For this reason, you must never be affected by the way ignorant people treat you. You remain what you are, whether people vilify you or glorify you. Learn to be contented in any and all conditions and to accept the circumstances fate gives you with complete imperturbability. Whether you work within the great divine plan requires you to live in abject poverty or to hold a high position and command a great fortune, you must regard either of these merely as a means to a great end. Neither of them must change your inner attitude. Learning to accept everything in this way is divine. On the other hand, you must always be able to decide when you, as a representative of divine guidance, must defend yourself against humiliation or calumny. In the same way, there are times when you must be able to decide that it's the right thing to do to withdraw modestly from glorification by the crowds and masses. To accept everything must never be allowed to degenerate into apathetic indifference or cowardly lack of character. Always choose the best and don't be satisfied with what's inferior. You must be able to differentiate and distinguish what's beautiful from what's ugly, the good from the bad, the true from the false, the divine from the satanic. Without a completely developed power to differentiate and distinguish, one can't be a useful co-worker in the great plan. If you want to be useful, you must also be able to fight with all your energy. With the sword of truth, you must be able to fight the shadow of error in order to help bring about the victory of divinity on earth. But your noble and courageous willingness to fight must never be allowed to degenerate into stupid quarrelsomeness. And I did that wrong for a lot of years when I first started coming into information about what's really going on in the world. I was very immature about it, which led to a lot of quarrelsome, a lot of arguing, and a lot of fighting. And through the path of evolving, and as I'm gaining wisdom with knowing everything that I know, I've been able to avoid arguing and fighting with people anymore. That's not what this is about. And even though you must often fight bravely, you must not forget that you have to fight with spiritual weapons in order to bring peace to the earth. You must fight to restore unity to what has been torn apart, to restore peace to those who are fighting. But your love of peace must never be allowed to turn into a cowardly or comfortable kind of not wanting to fight. And that's why I make it such an issue to unite the tribes, to unite all the nationality, the races, the creeds. We all can come together on these ideas of natural law. Let's put aside if you're right wing, if you're left wing. We're humans. That's the race. That's the human race. And we have to put aside our ego when it comes to these objective truths. In order to be a useful coworker, you also have to learn caution. At the same time, being able to decide the right time and right place to use this divine gift. You can save yourself and others from great dangers, harm, and useless sacrifices through the proper exercise of caution. But the divine gift of caution slips over into satanic cowardice when one doesn't dare to do something because of fear or lack of self-confidence. And I know it's hard once you start knowing a whole bunch of new information and you're the only one in the room that's speaking truth to power. I know how awkward that could be. And it really, it's something you could work on and master your craft and, sharpen your tools. And you will stand with an unshakable faith in confidence in truth. You must possess unflinching courage, and you must not fear any danger. You must stride forth courageously to face any difficulty, valiantly fending off any attack against the divine when the great goal you're working for requires it of you. But divine courage must never be allowed to deteriorate into daredevil recklessness. As a co-worker within the great plan, you must also understand what it means to possess nothing, whether your task demands abject poverty of you or gives you the greatest wealth. You must always remember that nothing, absolutely nothing ever or anywhere really belongs to you. On the contrary, everything is God's property. And from his property, you receive something only for your actual needs corresponding to your soul's task. Just as it's a matter of indifference to a canal, whether more or less water flows through it, because the water doesn't belong to it, you too must regard everything fate gives you as something that comes to you from God and something you must pass on. What you will have to live on is something you don't need to worry about. You will always receive as much as you need, and no matter how rich you might be, you must always remember the fact that you really possess nothing. But this divine positive attitude must never slide down into not caring about anything or contempt of things material. You must never accept the people about you to maintain you without work on your part. Wow, that's deep. And that's the perversion. And when we hear in the World Economic Forum talking about, own nothing and be happy, there's some truth to that. But it's perverted truth. They pervert it. They take grains of truth and then they make it seem like it's not good to have personal property. It's not good to own anything exteriorly. And that's not what it's about. It's not about giving up all your desires. It's not about that. It's about giving up the attachment to the desires, to not allowing the desires to become you, to not identify yourself with what it is that you do, that your job or whatever it is. You are not that. You perform that, but that is not you. You get rid of that attachment to the outwardly things. Matter, too, is a manifestation of God, so you must respect matter as something divine, but at the same time, you must be master over it. You must master the art of being able to acquire as many material things as you need for your earthly task. And remember, that as long as you're here on earth, you'll have to be dealing with matter, not without it, and certainly not against it. It's necessary for you to be able to acquire and hold matter, to master it, and use it wisely. For otherwise, you're completely at the mercy of earthly powers and under their control, unable to carry out your earthly task independently and freely. But take care lest the divine ability to master matter deteriorate into a selfish, satanic craving for possessions. As a co-worker in the great divine plan, you can't allow yourself to be attached to anyone. Learn to recognize the divine, the earthly, and the demonic characteristics in everyone. Don't love the person, but love the divine within the person. Tolerate the earthly and go around the demonic. Whenever your task demands it of you, you must be able to leave without a delay the person you love the most, because you must always remember that the lovable characteristics in him are God, not the person himself. The person is only an instrument for the manifestation of God. You can find and love the same manifestations in other people too. Love God in everyone. Then you will not be attached to anyone. This not having ties must never be allowed to turn into general indifference and apathy concerning the people around you. So it's not saying that, disregard everyone. It's not saying don't love someone. Again, it comes down to, loving that which is internal and not external, and not becoming attached to it. You should be loyal in life and in death toward the people in whom you have recognized God's manifestations. Your love, your master, and your co-workers is the great divine plan because you have recognized God in them. You are loyal to God in them because you love their person only as an instrument of God. In this way, the esteem and loyalty you show towards your master and co-workers can never turn into a cult of persons or personal glorifications. And that is something that you see. Like I said, the cult of the white coats. These gurus that people put up on such a high pedestal, or these ideas that people are so attached to, that even if they're given contrary information to what it is that this personality that they worship is saying is wrong, they're so attached to it. Their cognitive dissonance is so strong that even if the person that they're worshiping or believing is saying the wrong thing, that they're still staying attached to it. You should be loyal in life and in death towards the people in whom you have recognized God's manifestations. That's what I just read that book. To play a useful role in the great divine plan, you must be able to use your own person like an obedient instrument in front of the public. You must be able, in front of groups of other people, to animate your talents and abilities with your spiritual forces. Raise them to a climax of brilliance in such a way that you manifest your spirit in the highest degree through your person, through the posture of your body, through the movements of your hands, through the glance of your eyes, and through the persuasive power of your oratory. Also, that you can bring people under your influence and carry them upward with you to a higher spiritual level. In other words, you must be able to appear before the public without inhibitions and without being bashful. But the art of appearing in public must never be allowed to awaken the devil of vanity in you. It must never be allowed to degenerate into self-complacency and the base desire to show off with your God-given talents. When crowds of people enthusiastically cheer and applaud you, you must constantly carry in your consciousness the awareness that the people are not enthusiastic about your person, which is only an empty garment, but about God who has manifested himself through your earthly instrument. That's heavy. If in your application of the art of appearing in public, you avoid the beguiling temptations of the devil of vanity, you won't be the least disturbed when, in fulfilling your task, it becomes your duty to remain completely unknown and unnoticed by other people. Purest form of giving is anonymous from anonymous. In such a case, you must not display your talents, but rather disappear in the crowd, as it were, without wanting to stand out or be noticed. However, this modest remaining unnoticed must never be allowed to degenerate into personal self-underestimation or self-destruction. In your heart, you must always carry your worth as a human being. If you want to be a useful co-worker in the great divine plan, you must be able to achieve complete disregard for death. You must have the unshakable conviction that there is no death at all. Facts. When your body has ceased to be usable, yourself cast it off, just as you cast off a worn-out piece of clothing. The self, however, is a branch on the tree of life. Therefore, life itself, and life is immortal. When you've become identical in your consciousness with life, you won't shrink back in fear of death whenever your task brings you into mortal danger. On the contrary, with complete equanimity and absolute contempt for death, you will be able to face the greatest dangers, but never let contempt for death turn into disrespect for life. You must appreciate life above everything else. Life is God Himself. The eternal being manifests itself in everything that lives. You must never carelessly or wantonly expose yourself to danger. Appreciate life in your body too and live joyously. But the joy of living must never become an end in itself and turn into sensuality. And last but not least, you must be able to pass the most difficult test of all, the test of love and cruel love, indifference. This last pair of twin characteristics makes it up an inseparable unit right here on the earthly plane. Whenever you manifest one half of it, the other manifests itself automatically. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. You must completely give up your personal viewpoint, your personal inclinations and feelings, learning to love everything and everyone without distinction or discrimination, just as God loves everything and everyone. That's a hard one. That is hard. Just as the sun sends its loving radiations with perfect impartiality on the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the evil, the true and the false, you must learn to love the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the evil, the true and the false, without discrimination and with perfect impartiality. The highest kind of love of all, divine love, is the perfectly impartial love. You must be a matter of complete indifference to you, whether a thing or a person is beautiful or ugly, good or bad, true or false. You must love them all with the same love. You must learn that the beautiful wouldn't exist without the ugly. You must learn that the good wouldn't exist without the evil, nor the true without the false. And that's why you must love them all equally. You must learn that the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the evil, the true and the false are only reflected pictures of the ineffable, which we, for convenience sake, call God. Call it whatever you want. Call it whatever you want. When absolutely constant and completely impartial love radiates from you to all creatures, your love will never again be mixed with personal inclinations or antitheses. You will consider everything from the standpoint of the whole, and when the interests of the whole community are at variance with those of individual persons, you will unhesitatingly defend the cause of the group with ruthless disregard for the interests of individuals. But this ruthlessness must always be rooted in universal divine love. It must never spring from personal antipathy. It's hard to pronounce. Antipathy. Antipathy. And you must also be able to manifest your impersonal, cruelly impartial love for your fellow beings in those cases when their soul can perhaps only be saved at the expense of their earthly well-being. Even when such people are very, very near to you personally, you must even be able to look on dispassionately when those nearest and dearest to you get themselves into great danger. And if they don't react to ordinary measures, you must not try to hold them back by spiritual force, hypnosis, or magic powers when the salvation of their soul is at stake. It's better for a person to suffer material or physical ruin even death, than to lose their soul. Under all circumstances, you must endeavor to save his soul, just as God doesn't meddle in the affairs of men, but rather leaves them to their free will. You too must let your fellow human beings apply their free will, and you must never compel them to do anything by force, natural law. Never aggress upon someone else. This is the fundamental of natural law, is to not aggress upon other people. And people like me who were immature at times, I used to be aggressive mentally and emotionally with people, with trying to force this information down their throat, trying to force the truth down their throat. That I had to learn was not the correct path. It's not for me to determine, where you're at on your path, on your soul's path. I am to not interfere, but simply give breadcrumbs. And if this is your time to learn, then you will learn. But to force your will upon someone else is in violation of natural law. In your helpfulness, you must always consider everything from the standpoint of spiritual well-being, not from the standpoint of the earthly and physical. But this divinely impartial love must never degenerate into indifference and apathy. And you must never refuse to help a person because of personal anti-apathy when you can save him with earthly measures. And we all go through it. I get sometimes to the point where I'm like, nobody's listening. Am I wasting my time? And, and I want to give up in trying to relay this information, but I just can't do that. Not with everything that I know. I don't have the right to keep all this to myself. I have to put it out, and I'm finding my purpose in that. These are the hardest tests of all, because you give up your personal feelings, simply turning them off, as it were. Only when you have completely mastered the preceding 11 sets of opposite characteristics will you be able to recognize the voice of God so clearly as to be able to feel, even in the most difficult cases, what you should do in perfect divine love and what you should not do, natural law. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. You don't do the right thing in fear of getting caught. There's a big difference between that. You do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because you're scared to get caught. This is the internal monarchy, external anarchy. We all rule ourselves as kings, as in a balanced way, a balance between the right brain and the left brain. We rule ourselves. We don't need external kings to rule us because we're ruling ourselves. When we all choose, when we all start ruling ourselves, all of these external kings and these external monarchies and these external governments will disappear. The fact that we have external governments and external kings is just a reflection of us not ruling ourselves. Then you will no longer be able to err, because you will be love itself, and love can only act in love. You will only need to radiate yourself, to be yourself, and the whole universe will be able to draw from your warmth, from your light, and from your strength. Then you will have become divine yourself, and your consciousness will have become identical with God Himself. You will have this. You will have that. You will have that is from out of the realm of the tree of death, where everything is visible in the state of separation, into the realm of divine unity. You will then be eating again of the fruit of the tree of life. And of this fruit you will also give to eat to those who come after you, so that all may return to this unity of the immortal external life, to the eternal being, to God. And that's the problem that I have with religion in general, is that it's so focused on an exterior savior, that someone's coming to save you, that it becomes a savior complex when the kingdom of heaven is in you. It says that in the Bible, that the kingdom of heaven is within you. We all have that Christ consciousness in us. We are our own saviors. We are the only ones that are going to save ourselves. We will be our own redemption. Oh, you representative of God, I shall never, never forget your words. They have ingrained themselves so deeply in my soul that I have become identical with the meaning of these words. They're even gone into my blood, into the marrow of my bones, and I find myself a different person after this instruction from the one I was before. But my task is to make all this come true. Let that sink in. If you want to talk about it, hit me in the comments. We can elaborate on certain things more. I would love that. And everybody enjoy your day. Peace.